Here we go, Magnus. We'll have the white pieces in game one, and we will start with 90 minutes of 5+1 action. Are the players, Levy, feeling the butterflies in their stomach? Because I'm definitely feeling some in mine.
I think between the two, you gotta wonder. It's probably Alireza who is going to be a little bit more nervous. Magnus has been here before. We've got moves on the board, and Alireza returning to a King's Indian defense, or maybe a Grunfeld. It is indeed a King's Indian with the bishop on g7. Let's see if Magnus deviates from how Hikaru played it. So far, we have a main line.
And there is a certain elegance to Alireza's opening choice. It was his choice against Hikaru, who played the same-ish. And now unraveling a very rare variation of the King's Indian, h7, h6. And it gives Magnus some pause. I've seen this move before, but I think it's 7th or 8th on the list. I mean, knight c6, obviously, there was the main line. Alireza deploys his knight old-school fashion to d7.
Now, can you shine a light on why on earth Black would play pawn to h6 there?
So I think the idea, and I investigated this move briefly, not that I play the King's Indian, is it's prophylaxis. It's prophylaxis against bishop to e3, which is a standard developing move. Now it's not as effective unless you want to draw, because after knight g4, bishop g5 is no longer possible. You also don't want to give up the bishop, so you basically have to drop back to c1. And obviously, Alireza would love nothing more than a quick repetition to get the white pieces. For whatever reason, Magnus is like, no draw. And he also didn't play the Bong Cloud. Huge shout out to Noland. That was so impressive, so inspiring, and such a great way to set the tone for what promises to be a special match. Very positional treatment here from Magnus.
So far, so good. Yeah, this idea of rook to e1 and bishop f1 is not something you see often, but it's kind of a key idea in king's pawn positions, where you slide the rook over to defend the e4 pawn, and then the bishop comes back to f1 because it's not out on c4. So you're kind of combining ideas from multiple systems. Now, do you anticipate Magnus capturing on e5, pushing d5, or keeping the tension?
Well, the standard wisdom is that in response to the move rook e8, you want to make the rook look dumb and push d5. But, you know, you show this to one of the King's Indian OGs like Gligerich or Bronstein, and they'd be laughing at every one of both players' moves. Then they'd find out it was Magnus versus Firoujza, and they'd stop laughing. But after d5, Black has some kind of modern setup. Sometimes the knight goes around to h5. The bishop could even redeploy to e7 sometimes. So the King's Indian is less of a rigid opening than people might think. And Magnus actually trades.
Yeah, he trades, and he plays pawn to a3 with a very clear idea of playing pawn to b4. With rook b1 and a3, you're
not exactly hiding your intentions, are you?
If you don't play b4, I don't really know what you're doing. And so Alireza now has to make a decision as well. There's the maneuver to get the d7 knight to d4 via f8 or via c5, also opening up the light squared bishop. It's a critical moment. Now, he also may like pawn to c6 in certain positions because it stops the white knight on c3 from jumping forward. So it's a very big moment right away. Hey, every single match we've seen, the first game has been super tense. So this one also feels really tense.
Yeah, just kind of, we think the players might want to settle in, maybe make a nice little draw. That has not been the case in any of these matches. They go right into it, and this is what Alireza was calculating. Knight d7 to c5, engaging in very direct combat. Obviously, now Magnus could take on d8 and take on e5, but in the King's Indian, not only does Black often win the pawn back tactically, but even if you don't, you get a lot of activity. I'm looking at this b3 square. I think Magnus might choose a move like queen to c2, but then your idea, Levy, bishop to g4, the knight dropping back to e6. If Black gets access to the d4 square, White could end up being worse.
Right, because if you think about the light squared bishop trading for that knight and completely securing control over the center square on d4, Black just looks like he's dominating. And then you put the c, and he did play queen c2. Looks like you're a Magnus mind reader, which would help you win some games against him, I would imagine.
You would imagine, but somehow I don't win enough of them, and I don't win as many as I'd like.
So what's the point after bishop g4? Is he going to go like knight d2? He's going to move the knight out of the way?
Entirely possible. You can't allow bishop f3 under these circumstances.
Wow.
He does allow it, but then he would take on c5.
Yes,
He's
yes.
you take my knight, I take yours, and the d4 square is safe. If the knight drops away to e6, then Magnus could pick up the pawn on e5.
Does he just chop here? Does he just, I mean, Firoujza did that because he said, if you're going to take my knight, I'm going to get the two bishops, but I think it might be too much of a concession.
And you don't normally play the King's Indian if you care that much about pawn structure, but here he might be caring too little about it. Magnus could also play this move b4. That is an alternative. Same concept. If Black takes the knight, White picks up the knight with his pawn. Magnus starts by deploying his rook to d1. Very natural move, but is it counterproductive, Levy?
It very well could be. I suppose he didn't really mind the queen sliding out of the way, because now the queen loses some control over the d file, although now there are ideas where the queen can, first of all, go to a6, b7, and to the king side if the light squared bishop moves and captures on f3.
Yeah, I mean, queen c8 is a move black very well might play anyway. Now, bishop takes f3 would be way too juicy an option, followed by knight c5 back to e6. Now, Magnus would get the bishop pair. Of course, he could drop his own knight into d5. So the position, I think, is approximately equal, but it's very tense. The center's open. There's a lot of trades that could happen. It's hard to predict which direction the game goes.
I'm really surprised why Magnus hasn't played the move b4, because to my very elementary calculation, if the knight goes to e6, you simply play knight takes e5. And now Alireza completely shuts down b4 because of the en passant rule. Now Magnus was clearly waiting for that because he takes on c5. Now a4 pawn is hanging.
Yeah, Magnus, if he wanted to play b4, he should have played it before black played a4.
Yeah.
But now black might lose a4, and then he might play b4.
He doesn't want to lose a4, so he's bringing the light squared bishop back. It's also going to probably go to c6. And apparently Magnus is rushing in a little bit too quickly here. Black may have a move here. What about like something absurd like knight h7? No. I was just about to say that, and now pawn to c6.
The Alireza Whisperer strikes again, and look at that knight dancing and diving and knifing its way around the board back to e6 and the d4 square. Right, the knight is very far away from that square, but it can fly.
I think Magnus might have missed the concept of knight h7, f8, e6, d4. Knights are absurd in chess. They take 4 moves to get to the center of the board, and yet if the position is right, there's nothing you can do about it.
And, I mean, c6, obviously not possible at the moment, but Alireza is 1 move away from preparing it. Rook to b8, which is also a productive move because the b2 pawn is also under long-term pressure. This is the power of the pawn on a4. It basically keeps this pawn on b2 a backward pawn. The knight on d5 looks mighty impressive. It won't look all that impressive once there's a pawn on c6 attacking it.
In chess, you have to consider... okay, he says, whatever you can do, I can do better, although I'm not so sure about that, because that journey back to the center, there's already a knight there, so they're already running into each other. Okay, Alireza takes a moment to play h5, queen d2, multi-purpose move.
Ooh.
Yes, ideas on d7. Now, what will Alireza do here?
He Sneaky move, multi-purpose, protecting the bishop, and Magnus says, forget the d4 square, forget positional considerations, I checkmate you.
Pawn to g4 is a wild move. I think he's sensing something is happening in the position. If he plays it slowly, things will go wrong. But, Daniel, look at the position. He's got 3 central pawns, all on light squares. It's like Swiss cheese.
And, I mean, who's checkmating who? g4 is such a committal move. Alireza dries up the king side. Now, you would love to play g5 and position your knight on g4. Unfortunately, can't do that because the h3 pawn will fall. The queen on c8 is just a genius queen. It's out of the way of the other pieces. It's essentially invulnerable, and it's really slowing down white's kingside progress. Queen to g5 is very tempting, but Alireza might just jettison that pawn entirely and choose to get his knight into d4. We're about to find out, because queen g5 is on the board, and there's a threat of knight e7 check as well.
Knight e7 straight up winning an exchange and the game, because after that white infiltrates. I think you're right. He's got to cover the fork, but in doing so, queen d8 also loses a pawn because you take on c7. That also doesn't look particularly great. So what is the move? Maybe king to the h-file somehow? But you can't really do that either. So he just, knight e6.
Anyway.
Yeah.
In knight e7 check, he either planned an exchange sack and maybe went after white's queen, or maybe the king could have slid away, and you would have had total chaos there with both queens getting captured. So Alireza, he sacks the h-pawn, but he's got dark square control, the knight on e6 on a dominant post to protect the c7 square. This is high-level positional play by Alireza.
Yeah, queen d8 is such a deep move. So many of us would lose a pawn and think we need to start a counterattack. He trades the queen. So he trades a piece while down. This is why we always tell beginners, like, you've got to learn all the rules and then you got to learn when to break them. He's obviously at the level where he can break them. His freaking rating's 3,212.
Well, the longest reigning world champion, Emmanuel Lasker, he had that famous quote, to paraphrase, I spent the second half of my chess career unlearning what I learned in the first. So, as they say, always trade when you're down material.
Yes.
No, they don't say that, but Alireza's saying that.
Print that on a shirt. And speaking of shirts, we've got some amazing ones here at this Chess Championship. All right, let's focus on the game. But I gotta get the merge plugs in there.
Well, rook d2, protecting that weak b2 pawn. Remember that one? Both players under a minute already. It's like this is the 1+1 segment. They've only made 27 moves. And the question for Alireza, does he play c6? That move contains a big drawback, Levy. The a4 pawn is going to stay marooned after knight c3. You do not want to slide this rook away to a8. It's going to complain.
So you've got to find a way with black to activate your dark squared bishop. Otherwise, you will lose the battle of compensation. I think his idea here is to put the king on f7 and then to figure out where that dark squared bishop is going. Hey, how about f8, d6, and then c7, a5? Like,
oh my gosh.
Just like, and not eating your own piece, but just in a distant universe, that might be a plan. But also bishop to h6, of course.
I mean, if you could make one illegal move per game, bishop g7 to a5 might be one of the most epic moves of all time. That is the best way to that is the best way to kick that knight away from d5. But what a high-level positional battle. It's about to turn into maybe a low-level chaotic time scramble battle as Magnus doubles up on this bishop, inviting knight d4.
But Danya, what I love here for black is I think he's the one with the cornucopia, I'll take a word out of your lexicon, of,
Mr. Hunger Games.
Of you know, improving moves. He's got the knight on d4. His dark squared bishop is on the way as well. It feels like a position where Magnus may have to subdue Alireza unless, of course, he makes a mistake.
But you called it. This bishop on g7 is bothering me in the long run. You need it to participate eventually. Maybe it won't get to a5. Maybe it'll just get to e7, but the g5 pawn is also paralyzed. It's so hard to understand what's happening. The eval bar hasn't changed in like 34 moves, which is what move we're currently on. But the time situation certainly has, and we will get a time scramble in game 1, Levy.
Yep.
Here we go.
But you can also say it hasn't because they both have 16 seconds on the clock. It's going to be a mad, tense scramble as we approach the 40th move of the first game. And that maneuver is
moves
coming
away. How quickly did that happen as Magnus tries to access the h-file, knight f6, threatening a devastating check on h7.
And how does he get his second?
Alireza's going to lose a4. No, he's not.
Oh, but now his king's under severe danger.
Part 2, ladies and gentlemen, and rook h8 is finally going to drop that a-pawn. So Alireza tries to defend any way that he can. He takes it anyway.
Because knight e8, yes, knight e8 is a fork. Excellently spotted. It's a brilliant move by Magnus.
Oh my gosh, now the other knight joins in. Knight e to d7, zigging and zagging and pushing the pawn with 2 seconds for Alireza Firoujza as he tries to stop the pawn.
And Alireza took the pawn on g5, but now he's forked. Is there a way to fight back? He gets the a-pawn, Danya.
And the bishop on g8 was protecting the knight. I forgot about it. Material is somehow equal. Pieces are getting traded. Are we going to get a draw?
I think knight e6 is a draw. Okay, he goes bishop e6. Okay, now we're heading for a draw. Opposite colored bishops. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better first game.
A mutually beneficial arrangement and the antithesis of a Berlin draw to kick off the finals.
Oh. I don't know if I have the nervous system for 4 more hours of this.
No, I was going to say, okay, is this the end now? Can we go? Can we partake in some of Paris's fine cafes? Espresso, of course, nothing more than that.
Yes, Sabrina Carpenter.
Oh, my lands. That game was saucy.
I need a deep breath. I think I'm going to take it. Okay, we've got a Ruy Lopez. We've got a Spanish. I think they're going to explore a lot of different openings, a lot of different ideas and so on. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, both of these players, especially Alireza, he's expanded his repertoire. A Sicilian player by nature, 1 e4 with white. Magnus, of course, can play anything under God's blue sky. And speaking of saucy, we have someone who used to use that nickname here in the studio, Levy. I don't know who it might be.
I think I'm going to go, Danya. I think you've got a guest coming.
You're going to partake in some of Paris's fine cafes. We got Grandmaster Hans Niemann, the 4th place finisher, here in the studio. Welcome, Hans. Take a seat. Give it up for Grandmaster Hans Niemann, who will be joining us for the first half of the 5-minute segment. Hans, you got to admit the commentator's chair is the place to be, having experienced both this level and the ground floor.
Yeah, well, it's you have better air conditioning here. You have good fans. It's right here. That's why. Okay.
If you want to, use my suit for a bit, you might reconsider. But I think you made a better wardrobe choice. Hans, how was your rest and recovery yesterday? How are you feeling today? And your thoughts on the match thus far?
No, I feel normal. I've gotten much better at handling losses and learning from them. And to play against the best is a great opportunity. So and apparently my invitation has already been secured for next year. So it's a little bit less stress to slug it out in the titled cup. Because I barely made it this year. It was the last Grand Prix that I qualified, so I can maybe focus more on classical instead of playing every Title Tuesday for the next year.
Yeah, leave that to the retired commentator GMs. We'll give them more of a
chance.
And IMs.
Their lives matter too.
And Canada Masters.
Yes.
Who tend to do pretty well in Title Tuesdays. But let's start by looking at this second game. We have a Ruy Lopez. No surprise there from Alireza. First game was a very back-and-forth draw, but ultimately pretty high level. No big blunders. Your thoughts on this position here as Alireza trying to outplay Magnus in very typical Ruy Lopez structure?
Yeah, the pawn on b4 is a bit weird. Like, I don't know. Can you go back? When did he play b4? Like, before he played?
He played before.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay, yeah, this is very...
To kick the knight away.
Interesting, yeah. A5. Oh.
Challenging the b4 pawn, and now a3.
Yeah, it's unclear. It's unclear. Okay, black sort of has everything they want, right? The knight is on d7 already. Yeah, d5 comes. Usually you have this position, but the knight is on c6. So now you have pressure on the a file. I think he's already equalized quite easily.
And now a takes b4. Bishop takes b4 is also a threat.
Yeah.
A little bit awkward, or so it feels. Maybe c7, c5?
Yeah, probably I would presume that you might want to take on e4 and then play c5. c5 first. It probably doesn't make a difference.
I mean, we're close.
Well, now there might be e takes d5 now. Maybe because if you can take and then take on a5 maybe, and you have c4. Yeah, so he takes. He might play c takes b4 now, and then there could be.
There could be the record for most successive number of captures here.
Yeah, there's some weird tactics here. It's probably all going to liquidate. You probably want to trade the bishops. Definitely, I think c takes b4 you should include that because you can't really take on d5. If knight d5, then ba5, and yeah, so he takes. Yeah, you're probably going to trade on a1. Maybe I think bishop takes d5 is the most principled move.
Playing for the advantage. D takes b4 feels like very drawish, especially if the rooks get traded.
Yeah, you know, see, before you could play rook a8, queen 8, c4. That was probably a bit, it's a bit too much. Yeah, c4. The thing is, once they take on d5, you'll probably just play d4, and then everything's just going to get traded. But maybe could go wrong. We'll see if he can squeeze anything.
Okay, so here the big decision for white. c4 connected passers, but black had the c5 square.
Yeah, but no, just take and
white takes on e5. Black
takes on hey, I think you just take and play d4, and then everything is just traded.
And if white takes on d5, takes on e5?
Yeah, I think you'll play d4. There's knight b4, but you can even play like queen b1.
Okay, so this is 4 moves of successive captures.
Yeah.
This would be 5.
e5 is hanging, yeah, but that's a good point.
Knight e5, bishop b4, knight c6. This is why I don't calculate anymore.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably knight e5, knight b4. It's the simplest. I think it's going to liquidate.
Knight e5.
I like d4. I don't know, maybe I'm... But we'll see. It's very dry. This is the problem with the Marshall. Like, you see a little like 0.25, and then you think you have something, and then black just plays logical moves, and then the advantage just disappears.
You've shown a predilection for the Italian. Is it because of this? Do you feel like there's more life in that opening? Roy Lopez?
It's hard to say. Against Tikar, I went for the Roy Lopez, obviously because the system he was playing was quite shaky. But then he switched to Berlin, which is, of course, sort of indestructible. So I think in the Italian, there's a lot of life. I think that's probably the most important, like, high-level opening. Because, okay, the Petrov, you sort of just hate your life.
Both colors?
Yeah, for both. Yeah, and then the Italian is like, okay, the Berlin is just it's kind of lifeless, to be honest. Like,
what about the Jabava London?
Yeah, that.
Someone has a chessable course on it.
Yeah,
the name.
Yeah. It's fine. I forgot about that. Yeah. I think at the right moment, yeah, maybe in Bullet, I should have tried it. So, you know, there was a point where I played it so much that everyone was prepared against it.
Yep.
So maybe I can bring it back to life, and I think the surprise factor is really everything in chess right now. I think if you don't, it's just when you know your opponent's expecting it, it's just really, especially in a classical game, it's just not enjoyable when people can prepare, because there's so many lines like against the Jabava London, so it's easy to be surprised.
They keep adding new ones like a6 and h6 now.
Yeah, that actually was invented by Parham Maksudlu. And I stole that idea.
Well, that's what chess innovation is all about. You see something in a Bullet Brawl or a Title Tuesday, and then play it in a classical game, and
yeah.
Chess history gives you the footnote. Queen b2 in the meantime. So white refraining from knight takes e5. Black plays queen b8. Feels like maybe Magnus is playing for a small edge here.
Yeah, I think it's sort of imaginary, but it could go wrong. It could go wrong. Obviously, white's position's a bit loose. I don't know. I still think white is completely fine, but it's so solid. There are no weaknesses. Maybe knight c3. No, knight 5. No, knight c3. Knight c5. Okay. I still like white, but it's just so solid. But it's a little bit loose. Could go wrong.
Bishop takes c5 obviously loses a piece because of bc, hitting the b6 knight, which defends the other one.
Probably will play queen c8 maybe, or some. It's actually not that easy to choose a move here. It's not. Maybe queen d6. There could be d4. So you have to be a bit careful. Knight f6, it's very solid. Now the next knight comes to d5 or to d7. Yeah.
Very Magnus-like move.
Sort of like an imaginary.
Strongest piece.
Yeah, this sort of an imaginary advantage. Yeah, that's the issue, is that you sort of, with not much time, you can really play these positions quite quickly, and it's just like you're hit. That's what my match. I was playing the Italian against Maxime and Wesley, and my win rate with White was like insane, like maybe 4 games in a row, and that sort of didn't work well in both matches here. So if you can defend these positions well, then okay. See, now it's getting a little bit shaky. Not shaky, but the issue with these positions is that once one thing goes wrong, you start to get a bit nervous, and then another thing goes wrong, and then it's easy to sort of collapse in this time control.
And it feels like Magnus, obviously a lot of things make him as good as he is, but his technique, when he smells blood, he tends to pounce on the first available opportunity.
Yeah, maybe they'll repeat here. I don't know.
Bishop d6. Okay, suddenly he's 45 seconds up on the clock also.
Yeah. Well, okay, queen b.
What about d4 here? Is that beneficial for black?
Definitely not. I don't like. No, definitely don't want to close the bishop. d4, e4, knight e5, queen b7, and probably have some. Could be strategically risky at some point.
Knight d2, heading for e4. Alireza trying to bail out.
Yeah. Okay, probably.
You're like, this is the most boring SCC game of all time.
No, it's tick. Rook c. No, I don't like this. I don't like where this is going.
You think Magnus is in the driver's seat here, hitting the bishop?
Yeah, it's okay. It's fine. But
queen c2 not a thing because black will lose.
There's a little bit of momentum, but it's just I don't think it's enough.
Is White going for d4? Or is that
no? I think White's queen d5 is probably the next move, or just slow him like g3 because black doesn't have a move. You could have played. There could have been queen c2, take, bishop b5, f5.
Ooh.
And you could try something like that maybe. But
that was a cool trap, by the way. White could not have taken on e5. I'll show that really quickly, folks. Bishop e5.
Well, the rook moves, then you take on b4, and then maybe it's probably nothing, but it's all a draw.
Rook e8.
Yeah, okay, he's pretending. Yeah, queen f3. I don't like the structure. I don't know why he's not. Queen f3, rook e3, then queen a.
f5 maybe, hit the h pawn.
Maybe. I don't know.
What about e4 by black? That seems
e4. King f8. Sometimes you make a waiting move like this, but okay, yeah, I like this rerouting the bishop.
Bishop c1, bishop e3. Alireza with 10 seconds. He's obviously so good.
No, I think he's
little time.
Yeah, I think he's.
Now this is hanging 5 seconds. Rook a1 panicked.
No. Oh yeah, this is not. He should have just rooked you. Oh.
This pawn hangs, right? You can take it.
Yeah.
Oh, you can take this one too. Rook a7 though. Counterplay. Bishop c5 is threatened. Queen f5.
Probably have to. Maybe queen f5.
Even queen e6. That seems like a very Magnus move.
Yeah, that's. Put the pawn.
He loses another pawn.
Yeah, that's what you see. One thing goes wrong, and then it all collapses.
He was stable for so long. G4 Alireza trying to get a blockade going. Magnus wins these types of endgames almost all the time.
It's not that simple.
Rook a5, trying to go to a3, maybe get this pawn in motion.
Rook a4. This may be strong.
Ooh, rook e1. It's going in the toilet for Alireza.
Yeah, that's it.
e3 coming. e2, rook c1. Or rook rook takes d4. No, he makes a queen.
Okay, that's good technique.
Yeah, 2 extra pawns should be easy, right? No h pawn. And Magnus Carlsen with the victory in the second game.